Here's your Section 1. 2 shadows at the gate, written exactly to your structure and tone. No backstory, no explanation, just immediate sensory tension and cinematic atmosphere. Hashtag Section 1. 2 shadows at the gate. The wind dragged dust in low swirls across the hard pan, hissing as it licked the porch boards. A screen door groaned in its hinges, swaying an inch, then slamming back against the frame. Beyond the sagging fence, 2 shapes paused in the glare, thin, barefoot, braids whipping across their cheeks. They looked to the porch, then to each other. One reached for the latch. Creak. The gate yawned open, the hinges complaining in slow protest. They stepped through together, small shadows stretching across the yard. Sunlight caught the dull red in their hair, tangled with dust, and painted their eyes the pale, hard blue of Winter Creek ice. Boot steps sounded inside the house. Heavy, measured, deliberate. The twins reached the bottom step and stopped, looking up at the dark figure in the doorway. They spoke as one. "We heard you needed a man on the ranch. Our papa adores you." The wind caught the words and tore at them, scattering their softness into the heat. No answer came, only the slow shift of weight. A boot heel scraping wood, and a faint clink of something metallic, like a buckle or spur. A hawk wheeled overhead, its shadow sliding over the fence, the steps their bare feet. Far off, hooves drummed across rock and vanished into the canyon's throat. The taller twin took a half-step forward. Her lip trembled, but her eyes stayed fixed on the figure. He can't come himself. He's hurt bad." The other girl swallowed hard, her small hands twisting in the fabric of her dress. "They're coming tomorrow, the ones who said he owes them. If we ain't got someone who can stand for him." She cut herself short, glancing at her sister. The porch board sighed under the weight of the figure leaning forward. Still no answer. The taller girl pressed on, words tumbling now. "They said they'll take our place. The land, the barn, all of it. Papa said you'd know what to do." The air smelled of hot pine pitch and distant smoke. Flies buzzed slow circles over the porch rail. Somewhere behind the house, a pump handle squeaked in lazy rhythm, leaking water into the dry dirt. The smaller twin's voice broke. "He said you were the only one who could stop him." Silence. The girls shifted on the step, their small shadows flickering as a cloud crossed the sun. A boot tapped once on the porch. Then the figure stepped forward, the brim of a battered hat dipping into the light. The girls could see the hands now, rough, scarred, fingers nicked white from old blade work. A coat hung loose over shoulders that looked made for carrying weight and trouble both. The voice, when it came, was low, scraped raw from dust and years. "Your papa, he's still in the same place?" The twins nodded, almost in unison. The figure's eyes, unreadable from the shade, held them a moment longer, then turned toward the corral. A horse, dark as old river stone, waited there with saddle already cinched. The figure stepped off the porch without another word, boots thudding in the dirt, spurs breathing a faint chime with each step. Behind them, the screen door rattled shut. The girls stood still, watching as the rider swung into the saddle. The hawk screamed once, circling lower, as if it knew something had been set in motion. The rider turned the horse toward the canyon trail, pausing only to glance back at the twins. For a heartbeat, the brim lifted just enough of the light to touch the eyes, a flash of something cold, sharp, and certain. Then the horse moved, hooves kicking dust that clung to the air long after they'd vanished into the rocks. The twins stayed on the porch until the dusk began to fall. From somewhere beyond the hills, a dog barked, then went silent. The narrator's voice comes like the slow draw of a bow on fiddle strings. Back then, folks didn't know who she was or what she'd once done, but they were about to. If you like, I can now move straight into Section 2 following this exact mood and pacing, keeping the suspense and cinematic texture tight. Here's your Section 2, The Road Through Red Dust, written to match your outline in Section 1 style. Hashtag Section 2, The Road Through Red Dust. The horse's hooves drummed a steady rhythm against the hard trail, each strike puffing up red dust that clung to the twin skirts. The canyon walls rose in jagged layers, their shadows cutting sharp across the ground. A magpie flitted from rock to rock ahead, its black wings flashing blue in the sun. The taller twin walked close to the horse's flank, her small hand brushing the stirrup leather. The shorter one kept glancing over her shoulder, as if the dust might form into riders at any moment. The rider said nothing. The reins lay loose in a scarred hand, eyes always sweeping ahead, scanning the ridge lines and gullies. Wind carried the dry rattle of mesquite branches. A mile out, they passed a row of fence posts. Charred stumps now, blackened at the tips, wire curling like dead snakes. A calf lay stiff in the grass beyond, ribs showing under hide, eyes clouded. The taller twin's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. A shadow flickered along the canyon wall. The rider's gaze lifted. High above, a man on horseback sat still among the rocks, his outline jagged in the heat shimmer. His face was hidden under the brim of a hat, but the set of his shoulders was wrong, coiled, waiting. The rider slowed, the horses breathing loud in the still air. No hand went to the rifle, no twitch to the hip, just a long look upward. The man in the rocks shifted once, as if weighing the moment. Then he turned his horse and melted back into the stone maze. The shorter twin let out a shaky breath she'd been holding. The rider nudged the horse forward again, saying only, asterisk, keep walking. Asterisk. Dust settled behind them in a slow, red curtain. By midday, the heat pressed down like a hand. Sweat ran in thin lines down the girl's temples. They stopped at a shallow waterhole where cattails leaned tired and yellow. The horse drank deep, nostrils flaring. The rider crouched by the edge, filling a battered canteen, eyes flicking to the canyon mouth and back again. The taller twin crouched nearby, tracing the edge of her boot in the dirt. Papa says they send men ahead. To scare us. Burn things. The rider didn't look up. They were watching. The shorter one shivered though the sun burned hot. The trail narrowed after the waterhole, twisting between boulders the size of wagons. The sound of hooves and footsteps echoed close, making it hard to tell what was ahead or behind. In a patch of shade, the rider pulled the horse up short. A single horseshoe print pressed fresh into the dirt. The edges still sharp, the sand inside unstirred by wind. The rider studied it a long moment, then turned the horse toward the open flat beyond the rocks. They came out of the canyon onto a sweep of open land. In the far distance, a house crouched low against the ground, weatherboard silver with age. A thin line of smoke curled from the chimney. The twins broke into a trot, skirts lifting dust. On the porch, a man lay propped against pillows, his face gray under the sunburn, one hand clutching a blanket tight to his chest. His breath came shallow, catching with a cough that stained the cloth red. When his eyes found the rider, he blinked twice as if the light had lied to him. A name left his lips, not the name the twins had been using. Something older, something heavy. The rider swung down, boots hitting dirt with a dull thud, and crossed the yard without a word. Kneeling beside the man, they gripped his shoulder once, firm and steady. The man coughed again, managed a thin smile, and whispered, asterisk, knew you'd come. Asterisk. The rider's gaze held it for a moment, then drifted past him to the horizon, where far off a brown haze was rising, thick and steady. The sound came a moment later, the faint thrum of many hooves. The rider stood, pulling the brim low against the sun. Rest. I'll handle it. The twins stood frozen by the porch steps, their eyes following the rider's line of sight to the dust on the horizon. Somewhere in that growing haze, trouble was already riding. If you want, I can keep the exact same cinematic tension for Section 3, the gathering storm, so the suspense keeps building without losing that old frontier storytelling voice. Here's your Section 3, the gathering storm, following the exact tone, pacing, and outline. Hashtag Section 3, the gathering storm. The rasp of a whetstone slid along steel, slow and steady. Shavings of light curled off the knife's edge. The rider sat on an upturned crate by the barn, the blade in one hand, oil rag in the other. The twins moved quietly nearby, mending a tear in the chicken coop wire. Wind pushed low clouds across the sky, turning the sun's heat into a muted, watchful gray. From the corral came the clink of metal, the rider checking the old rifle, cycling the lever, listening for the smooth click. Saddle straps lay coiled at their feet, freshly tightened. A wagon rattled past the road's bend. 2 men inside stared long at the ranch before rolling on toward town. By late afternoon, the sound of hoofbeats came from the east. A lone rider, broad-shouldered, scar cutting from brow to cheek, silver spurs flashing, reined in at the gate. His horse blew dust through flared nostrils. He didn't dismount. "Baron says you got till sundown tomorrow. Then this land's his. Debt's got to be paid, in gold or in ground." The rider said nothing, eyes steady on the man. "I'll tell him you'll be ready to hand it over." The reply was calm, flat. "Tell him I'll see him at dawn." The man's lip curled. He spat into the dirt, wheeled his horse, and rode back the way he'd come, the jingle of spurs fading with him. The twins stood in the doorway, hands tight on the frame. The rider slid the rifle into its scabbard, then knelt beside a saddlebag, checking cartridges one by one. Each brass shell clicked into place like a bead on a rosary. By dusk, neighbors began arriving. A ranch wife brought bread. A gray-haired man leaned his shotgun by the wall without a word. They didn't stay, just left what they could, their faces taut with things they wouldn't say aloud. The wind rose as night came, rattling the loose tin on the shed roof. The lamp in the kitchen swayed on its hook, shadows slipping across the walls. In the back room, the twins' father coughed hard, the sound raw. The rider sat beside him, elbows on knees. His hand found hers, and he held it with surprising strength for a man so worn. "Thought you'd gone for good." "Tried to?" A pause, the silence heavy between them. "This isn't your fight." "It is now." The man gave a tired laugh, cut short by another cough. "You still carry it? After all this time?" No answer came, only the flicker of eyes that said more than words. From the hallway, the twins pressed their ears to the wall, their small fingers clutching the wood. They heard nothing else but the long sigh of wind through the eaves. Outside, the clouds had thickened into a low, bruised sky. The smell of rain rode the air, mixing with the iron tang of coming trouble. Far out past the ridge, in the faint light before the storm, a thin column of dust was moving, steady, unbroken, toward the ranch. "If you want, I can go straight into Section 4. The man they thought they knew, so the showdown and reveal flow without a break in the tension. Here's your Section 4. The man they thought they knew, keeping exact pacing, tone, and structure consistent with the previous 3. Hashtag Section 4. The man they thought they knew. Rain misted over the dry riverbed, turning the dust into a thin skin of mud. The rider sat astride the dark horse, eyes fixed on the line of men ahead. A dozen in all, their hats pulled low, rifles laid across saddles. The Baron waited in the center, a black coat draped over his broad frame, silver watch chain glinting in the gray light. "You're no man," he called, voice carrying in the stillness. "And this is a man's business." The rider's brim lifted just enough to show the curve of a faint, cold smile. "I've buried better men than you before breakfast." A ripple of laughter from the Baron's men. A few shifted in their saddles, the ease in their posture more show than truth. The rider swung a leg over and stepped down into the mud, boots sinking half an inch. The rifle came free from its scabbard. The lever worked once, the click sharp in the morning air. The first shot broke the sky. The rider moved like water poured over stone. No wasted motion, each pivot placing them just out of a bullet's path. The rifle spoke in quick, certain bursts, each report sending a man off his saddle, hitting the ground with a heavy, wet thud. The Baron's grin faltered. His hand went to his pistol, but the rider's next shot blew it from his grip, spinning it into the mud. Gasps echoed from the ridge above. Townsfolk and the twins watching, their small hands clutching the railing of a neighbor's wagon. The Baron's voice cracked into a snarl. "I know you now. Fort Briggs, the woman who—" That was a long time ago. Lightning forked across the horizon. In the flash, the rider's face was clear, hard as the stone ridges, eyes lit with the fire of someone who'd stood too long in a line of guns and walked away each time. The last 2 of the Baron's men rushed from the flank. The rider spun, rifle but smashing one in the jaw, a sidearm drawn in the same motion. One shot dropped the other where he stood. Mud splashed high as the Baron lunged forward barehanded. His weight hit like a hammer, but the rider took the impact, boots digging deep, one knee driving into his ribs. They grappled in the rain, the Baron swinging wide, sloppy with rage. The rider moved low, fast, turning his own momentum against him, in one motion. The rider's hand locked around his throat and shoved him down into the mud, the barrel of the Colt pressing between his eyes. Debts paid. The Baron froze, chest heaving, rain streaking his face. He nodded once, more a twitch than a bow, and stumbled back when the gun lowered. The survivors gathered him up, retreating into the sheets of rain until they were only shadows in the mist. Silence fell. Only the hiss of rain on mud remained. From the ridge, the twins broke from the crowd, running down the slope, skirts soaked and heavy. They skidded to a stop in front of the rider, eyes wide. "You could stay," one breathed. "Help us." The rider wiped rain from the brim, gaze drifting toward the horizon where the canyon walls swallowed the road. "Not my way." They swung into the saddle, the horse turning with slow certainty toward the trail. The twins stood together in the rain, watching until the shape of horse and rider blurred into the red mist beyond the storm. The old storyteller's voice came low, like embers settling in a cold hearth. "Some say she still rides out there, where the red dust meets the sky. Others swear she never left at all, only waits for the next knock on her door. If you want, I can now compile all 4 sections into a seamless single 4,000-word cinematic western, so it reads like one uninterrupted tale.